Welcome to Teaching Truth. The beautiful island of Malta ranks as one of our favourite holiday destinations as a family. And on the 3 occasions that we've been to Malta with Jet2 holidays, we've stayed in Paradise Bay, we've stayed in Melilla, and we've also stayed in Bugiba. Laterally, when we stayed in Bugiba, I remember after dinner one evening as the sun was setting, we walked together along the rocky beach that is St. Paul's Bay that lies adjacent to Bugiba. And as we walked along that rocky beach of St. Paul's Bay, I permissioned myself in my mind to think about the events of Paul being shipwrecked in Malta. Paul's shipwreck that we read of in Acts chapter 27 and 28. I cast my mind back 2,000 years and imagined what it must have been like for Paul and his friends to have been shipwrecked on that very beach that we were walking along on that beautiful summer evening, the beach of St. Paul's Bay. As we conclude our reflections this week under the theme of Shipwrecked, we want first of all today to look at the fact that it was a storm which led Paul and caused Paul to find himself shipwrecked and find himself on that beach, that rocky beach in Malta. As Paul set sail, the wind that was behind the ship, the wind that was giving voyage to them, was a gentle south wind, and that was a very favourable wind indeed. The conditions as they set sail towards Crete were ideal for sailing. And bear in mind that in those days, the boats would have had sails, and therefore the wind was key and elemental to their making progress. No wind, no progress. The right wind, the right course. Now hold that in your mind and read the next verse or so in Acts 27, which tells us that a wind of hurricane proportions appeared. It was hurricane northeaster. Just like the hurricanes that we hear about and the storms that we hear about these days are given names. A northeastern wind was a very stormy wind indeed. See, Paul had just completed 3 missionary journeys. 3 missionary journeys which, although had been tough for Paul, would have undoubtedly given him great encouragement as the word of God had spread and churches were planted. Paul thought as he was sailing out on the Mediterranean that everything was going so well, and then all of a sudden a storm, a hurricane is whipped up. And therein lies a very important point for us to remember, that whatever role we may have in our Christian ministry and service, so often we can be sailing along quite merrily, everything going so well, and then all of a sudden we face a spiritual storm, a storm which can so easily knock us off course. You might be in a spiritual storm right now. You might feel as if you're being knocked off course. You might feel depressed, downcast, or defeated. Well, hear the words of the prophet Isaiah. Fear not, For I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. Friends, the waves will not overcome you. The storm will not be the end of you. And because of the wind, there was worry. Worry because of the effect that the wind was having. The lifeboats were beginning to wrench themselves away from the ship. The ship was being blown towards the nearby sandbanks. The cargo and the tackle were being thrown overboard as the weather became worse, and the dark clouds in the sky were blocking out the sun and the stars as they continued to sail. You see, this really was a force 12 gale, hurricane in the Mediterranean. And even Paul himself, gave up all hope of being saved. There was worry, there was fear, there was a sense of hopelessness, because the storm showed no signs of receding. It continued to rage, we read, for many days. There may be a storm raging in your life, and it's been raging for many days. But like Paul, in that storm, in that hurricane, don't give up hope. Sheila Walsh, who comes from my home county of Ayrshire, speaking from her heart in her book, Life is Tough, but God is Faithful, and the title of it really speaks for itself, says this: when life doesn't make sense anymore, we can give up, or we can remember who Jesus really is, and that no matter how dark it gets, he is worth it all. The storm was raging. The darkness kept them from being on course. And yet, in this apparently hopeless and worrying situation, Paul indicates to his fellow passengers that they are to wait, to keep up courage. He affirms his faith in God. And even in the eye of the storm, even in the darkness of the night, as we are sailing through the circumstances of our life, we may have to wait on God. And it's often in the darkness of a situation that God reveals himself. They who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. There are lessons which we can learn from the storm, from the hurricane which Paul encountered. The storm. Join me tomorrow in Teaching Truth as we look at the security in the storm.